Welcome. This is the show. Now is the time to talk. I'm your host, Jesse Gillis. Today I have with me a special guest, Will Hopkins. And I'd like to start this show with something. Again, I typically on this, I forget the author's name. I didn't write it down, but it's something I've remembered from my notes. It's not they gave their lives for this country. Their lives were taken from them. They were sacrificed. They didn't sacrifice for their country. The country did not profit from their deaths. We did not benefit. Their families did not benefit. They lost their loved ones. We lost a neighbor, a friend, a community member. They were killed for the government, for war profiteers, merchants of death, for sociopaths in suits with titles and honors, and spoke of care for armed services. So they were sent to die on foreign land, in Korea, in Vietnam, in Iraq again, in Afghanistan. This is something I pulled from Bakovic's book here, Passive Descent, Soldiers, Iraq, Afghanistan. But today I have an opportunity with you, Will Hopkins. Can you tell us something about you?
Sure. So I joined the National Guard back in, it was the spring of 2001.
Yeah.
So I had finished my freshman year of college at humane Farmington. I took my second semester off my sophomore year to teach skiing, and unfortunately learned that in April the snow melts and you have to find something else to do, and I decided that basic training would be a great chance to get in shape for rugby season, and geez, they'd help pay for college, and I'd be able to protect my family and be here in case of natural disaster to support my community. And so I went down to an Army recruiter's office and I joined New Hampshire's only National Guard infantry unit, a mountain infantry unit. At the time it was out of Manchester. They've since moved to Milford. And so I'd just graduated. I did what's called a split option. So I did basic training the summer of 2001 and infantry school the summer of 2002. So I was about 2 weeks home from basic when on 9/11, and that altered my path. Obviously, I wasn't. This unit had existed for 23 years and had only been called for ice storms and floods in state. They'd done training out of state, but this is the first time they'd ever been deployed. Although right after 9/11, portion of the unit was deployed to the airports to do security. But I wound up in Iraq in 2004 and 2005. It was a tense time of the war, and our mission was route security and convoy escort from about 40 miles north of Baghdad to a base called Scania, about 40 miles south of Baghdad. And so we'd, when we were doing convoy escort, we'd have 30 vehicles and three up-armored Humvees that we'd use for escort, and we'd escort the 18-wheelers down just north of Baghdad on Iraqi Highway 1, which we called MSR Tampa, and then we'd take MSR Sword, which was a little bypass that went around to the west of Baghdad towards Fallujah, and then kind of swing back around south and go to Scania. It was our normal supply route. We had 23 Purple Hearts in the unit. We were the only company in our brigade that didn't have anyone die. We had a lot of people get shipped home injured. I fired a few hundred rounds in combat during that deployment. It included being, we usually stayed at LSA Anaconda in Balad, Iraq, north of Baghdad, but during the Fallujah offensive, my squad was detached and sent down to do cordon for that. So we were making sure that people didn't leave or enter the city during the fall 2004 Fallujah offensive. I came back and felt really terrible about what I'd been a part of. I had a lot of sure, I had PTSD. I had trouble going grocery shopping because I felt like I had to watch everybody around me because they were a threat. I had rage, all the normal issues, but I felt terrible about what I'd been a part of, what I'd seen, what I'd done, because it made sense to me that people were defending their country from a foreign invader. Within a few months of going to Iraq, I reached the conclusion that the war was not legal. But I didn't, when I was deploying, at that point, people were still doing at least a year and a half for refusing deployment, and I didn't want to live my life with the labels traitor, coward, convict. So I went and I did my job, and I came back and I knew I'd done something wrong. I knew I had invaded someone else's country in violation of international law and in violation of my own conscience. And that drove me first actually to the presidential campaign of Dennis Kucinich. If you remember Dennis Kucinich, he was the 2008 peace candidate. This was just after I got out of the Guard. I was still in active reserve, so I had to be a little careful for a couple years. But I began just doing introductions for Dennis Kucinich, and then somebody at New Hampshire Peace Action realized there was a New Hampshire vet supporting Dennis Kucinich and speaking out, and connected with me. And before I knew it, I was really tied in with New Hampshire's peace community. About a year later, I joined the board of directors of New Hampshire Peace Action while I was finishing my bachelor's, and then I got my master's, and wound up about a year after I finished my master's taking over as executive director of New Hampshire Peace Action. And I ran Peace Action for 14 years. It was a really wonderful journey. Loved doing it, and it was a great 14 years, and I really burned out. I felt like I just lost all the energy for it, and decided it was time to make some space. After about a year of, I took a few courses and took some time to myself, and then I tried to step up to the position of National Executive Director of Veterans for Peace, which is an organization that I've been a member of for 15 years or so, and whose mission statement I really identify with. But what I found was that a lot of progressive nonprofits, not just Vets for Peace, but all over the place, are bad ideas frequently are moved forward. And a director's job is in part to make sure that those bad decisions don't go through without some resistance. And I found that I was really averse to conflict, that I couldn't get into conflict even when it was something that really mattered to me. And so 30 days in, I made the decision to step down from that position. And since then, I've done a lot of vacuuming, making lunches for my kids, and feeding my cows. So, so that's my background. Right now I am a farmer and a dad, and that's about it. But there was a time where in New Hampshire's peace movement, at least, I was out in front.
And it's quite a struggle. I don't know how you feel about what's going on today. When I was at the last protest and I see the support NATO signs, or stick up for Ukraine by sending more weapons to Ukraine. What's this? I assume that would be unheard of when you were still pretty active.
Well, I mean, so Ukraine happened the invasion of Ukraine happened while I was still at Peace Action. And it's a really hard thing for folks in the peace movement to address, because there is this sense that it is a left-right issue, and that the left supports Ukraine and that the right supports Russia, and so it's a little confusing to be oriented away from militarized aid, oriented away from arming. When the war in Ukraine began, I looked at the email blasts that I'd sent out to New Hampshire Peace Action's 2,000 members, and the first time that I wrote about Ukraine was in 2013, and it was when it was when
it
Obama had named the State Department. Drawing a blank.
In charge of Eastern Europe, Victoria Nuland.
Victoria Nuland,
her
thank
position
you.
under the State Department.
So to be in
Kerry.
charge of Eastern Europe, and I was writing about her history and the things she'd said publicly, which were basically, this U.S. policy in Eastern Europe should be focused on selling as many weapons as we can, especially in the Warsaw Pact states. This is our new business area where we can now sell arms again. And that was her purpose, and she was open and public about it. This is what I want to do. I want to sell weapons here. And then she made a bunch of really negative comments about how she viewed the future with vis-a-vis Russia and NATO, and it was a really dangerous naming, to name somebody who was so out in front about the importance of not of keeping conflict at bay, not at keeping the Cold War asleep, but at maximizing arms sales. And we have the vote on the Crimean Peninsula to join Russia, which of course was more than 95% in favor. Then the invasion of Crimea and annexation of Crimea, which when you're talking about U.S. militarism, it's hard. I don't believe that Russia is good. I don't believe China is good. I think most governments are very much corrupt and very much oriented towards the wealthy people who back and prop up their leaders. And there were so many times in that period between 2014 and 2023 when I wrote emails saying, look, we're doing this in this part of the world that's very provocative to Russia. We should talk to them about these things. Russia, for a few years leading up to the invasion of Ukraine, had asked for security guarantees from the U.S. Said, we want to make sure that nobody is going to stage an army east of the Caucasus. This is a wide open plain to Moscow, and every 100 years a European army tries to sweep across. And if we can't stop them at the mountains, we can't stop them. We want to talk about security guarantees, and we wouldn't even put it on the table. The number of emails that I sent out saying we're doing using intermediate range super hypersonic missiles. These are missiles that can change direction really quickly. They're flying under radar, that you don't know if they're nuclear armed or not. And we're testing them near Russia. We're using them in the Middle East within range of Russian targets. And that's really dangerous because they don't know. You fire something at Tehran, and they don't know if that's going to change direction. It's hypersonic. It's under radar. They know it's fired. They can't track it. They don't know if it's nuclear. I think it was Secretary of Defense William Perry who called them uniquely destabilizing. And he also started under the Obama administration saying that we had reached a point where we were in more danger of having a nuclear war with Russia than at any point during the Cold War. I don't know if I agree with Secretary of Defense William Perry. I'm Will Hopkins from New Hampshire. I've never been Secretary of Defense. But to me, it's like, well, at least, now we have a phone line, right? Like the president can call and talk to Putin. There are some channels of communication. I have to believe that's a little better than where we were in the Cuban Missile Crisis. But still, if Perry thinks that, things have got to be pretty bad. And so it was something where I had every step of the way said the U.S. needs to make different decisions if we're going to avoid a broader conflict with Russia. And I said it over and over and over again. And then we come to the point where Russia invades. And of course, the line in the media is, Russia's invasion of Ukraine is totally unprovoked. It's totally illegal. Whereas the invasion of Iraq wasn't illegal. That was somehow self-defense. Messaging that was really, really challenging for me in that position because I had been saying for years, we need to not do this. It's going to be provocative. It's going to put us in a position where Russia's going to be backed into a corner and forced into conflict. But then you're at a point where you're always in the peace movement trying to message to the left. I'm not trying to message to Trump supporters. I'm messaging to folks on the I'm messaging to. When you think about a spectrum of allies, which you have your people who are actively engaged and the people who aren't, and then you have your opponents. And I always, we think of it as a right-left, and the right wing is extra militarist, and the left wing is extra PC. But suddenly we have kind of a pole reversal on peace, where Trump is saying we should not be sending more weapons to Ukraine, and the left is saying Ukraine has to win this war, and it was really, really hard to know how to message in a way where we could continue to grow and talk to new people, yet maintain some sense of honesty about the role that the U.S. played in getting us here, and how we could have made different choices that led to different outcomes for Ukraine. Because I do believe that the U.S. policy could have stopped this outcome.
That's where I feel like it's a spectacle, as far as it's quite convenient to have Trump, who is considered Putin's puppet or whatever other names you want to say, but we're going to ship all those weapons, and we're going to ship more of it to Ukraine. And the Russiagate thing in the beginning, 2016, as he's getting all this flack for all the Russia interfered with our elections, he's shipping more, and I think the most munitions to Ukraine during that time. It all goes under the table, or it goes on without any observation, because this is actually quite convenient cover. And that's where it feels like it's wrestling. It's a spectacle. It's convenient cover. And so now, Trump and Putin are together destroying Ukraine, ship more weapons. I don't know. And so I don't understand. So I was involved in the peace movement, and I see that Russia's invaded Ukraine, but it took me a week to figure to the position I'm at now. Like, no, this isn't okay. This is militarism. This is an expansion of NATO. This is creating arms deals, publicly funded weapons deals for arms manufacturers to send to Ukraine, and it couldn't be more convenient. And now I go to protests and I see support NATO signs. Where?
I mean, I sometimes talk about the peace movement like the Kurds, right? Like, when it's convenient for the Democratic Party to, like in 2008, 2006, when there was a major anti-war sentiment, when it's convenient, they'll include that in their message. But the Democratic Party, in particular, is, they want to, we can put it the way Chris Pappas puts it, that his goal when he goes to Washington is to make good jobs, keeping America safe, right? Which is, keeping America safe is double speak for make weapons.
Sorry, go on.
Well, and it takes a media that's complicit in making us think we are threatened by Putin, by Muslims, by Venezuelan gangs, whoever it is, and it takes a bipartisan limitation of what it's okay to talk about and what it's okay to hope for in our government.
So, going back, so we have war, and I've had a couple things just for this discussion. War, in the sense that to be outraged by murder of an individual, and now you have the celebration of mass murder, because those people have now, once you sign up to war, all those people's lives are valueless, right? You can celebrate victory, destruction of them, and you joined in 2001 spring, you said, deployed in 2004, but in between that time we invade. It's March 2003, and by May, Paul Bremer, I think, is he leading the coalition government in 2003? Is it that early?
I don't remember.
But the war seems like, did you feel before you got there that it turned from war to occupation, or was it always war?
No, I mean, I'm not sure I knew the difference then. when I was there, in hindsight, what I see is occupation. There wasn't a line of contact we were moving to.
Right.
There wasn't an opposing army. We were driving a route, and there were insurgents who would sometimes engage with us. But the country was controlled by U.S. forces at that point.
Like colonial outposts.
Yeah.
You have routes between the forts.
That's right. We had FOBs, FOBs, forward operating bases. We had LSAs, which are life support areas, and those were bases like LSA Anaconda, where I live. That was more than 20 miles across, had 10,000 people on it. As it turns out, we were the only infantry unit stationed on LSA Anaconda. All the rest were at forward operating bases around us. We were the only ones who were an actual infantry unit on that huge base. But they had. We had Subway, Burger King, Pizza Hut, indoor and outdoor pools, a movie theater, a Walmart-sized PX, 4 dining halls. It was a walled city, and then you'd have these little 5-mile wide forward operating bases scattered around, and then roads in between. But there was no opposing military. Nobody was. We weren't. We weren't moving into contact or areas controlled by insurgents. We were holding the country which we had conquered at that point. And so it clearly was occupation. I'm not sure I understood the difference at that stage in my life.
Yeah.
So I just did my job. And
yeah. War has no unfortunate atrocities. War is an atrocity where the killing is accepted and expected. The other combatants no longer have life. And that's where, whether it's war or occupation, whether it was Iraq or Afghanistan, whether it was Vietnam or any of the other wars we've been in, Iraq the first time, their lives are valueless. And you could say, oh, it's collateral. I forget when the term collateral damage switched from these are civilians that are now getting caught in the crosshairs, but no, it's an event of devaluing, and it was. Bakovich talked about it. It was a crime. Vietnam was a crime. Maybe Iraq the first time was.
I don't think you can convince people to kill each other without dehumanizing. That it's something they start in basic training. Using. For in the period I was there, it was a lot of Muslim slurs, but. Even just, the enemy, like the enemy is out there, and you have to think about them as the enemy who needs to be destroyed. Your mission is to engage and destroy the enemy, and the enemy is them. And so you've got to other and you've got to dehumanize, because people won't just kill other humans. You have to instill in them that the other side's not human. It's part of what you have to do to a brain to get it to a place where it's willing to take another human life, and that's there's a science to teaching a brain to kill, and obviously they're very good at it, but that's part of it. Dehumanization has to be.
I'll save this for another point. 2 more quotes. Legislatures. Daniel Webster, our state legislature, right? 1812. May God in his compassion shield me from any participation in the enormity of this guilt. This is the provoking, this is trying to annex Canada the first time, right? And, I took Pierce's quote off of here. And I brought this because I brought this to the protests and war criminals, and some people were giving thumbs up to this and thinking maybe Putin on the other side, if there was another side, or just Trump for what he's doing with Putin in Ukraine. But then I turn around and people see the other side, and this is Yemen. It seems like, what's this new thing? And then but that's been going on for some time. You've been dealing with, peace action. This is something that's been on your radar.
So this is Yemen is one of the, there was a member of Vets for Peace who emailed both of us a while back and said, does VFP actually do anything for world peace? So Yemen is something that Vets for Peace and Peace Action and the entire peace movement really got together and did something about. There were about 250,000 civilians in Yemen dying every year, and this is this has been ongoing.
250,000 every year.
Every year.
Okay.
And that's primarily starvation, but also an engineered cholera epidemic, lack of access to clean drinking water, and a blockade by a UAE and Saudi Arabia-led coalition of Sunni governments targeting the Houthis. And so, more starting under Obama, moving through the Trump administration, we were funding, we were arming, we were providing air refueling, intelligence support, satellite reconnaissance to this effort, and it led to well over 1 million civilian casualties, and again, that's mostly starvation, malnutrition, and cholera. And that was intentional. The cholera was intentional, and making sure that no meds could get in to deal with the epidemic was intentional. And we really, I think we owe national leadership to the Friends Committee on National Legislation, a 501c4 organization created by the Quakers, and a man named Hassan al-Tayyab, who's their Middle East policy director. And they really took lead on a legislative push that was looking just to basically freeze the supplying of replacement parts for the F-15 and ending air refueling and satellite reconnaissance, the direct support we were giving, based on the reality that Yemen was under genocide conditions. 250,000 people a year dying. It was the largest humanitarian crisis on Earth. Not that that was covered by our media or that anyone would have known it, which in some ways worked to our advantage because not enough people were working on the other side to stop our legislative push. And 3 years in a row, this amendment failed. FCNL led the charge, got the bill put in, but those margins got smaller and smaller until it looked really close. Like maybe if things kept moving in the direction they were within a year or two, after Jamal Khashoggi, the journalist, was murdered by the Saudis, right. In particular, that was kind of a turning point where we started picking up more and more votes each year. And the situation we found ourselves in was that it looked like we were going to successfully shut down U.S. support for the Saudi-led coalition in Yemen. And when that happened, the Saudis went to the Chinese and asked them to broker a ceasefire, which was successful. And of course, now we're bombing Yemen and things are kind of back on there. But for over 2 years, medical supplies and food and clean drinking water were allowed into Yemen, not on the scale that would fully stop things, but during those 2 or 3 years, we probably saw 300,000, 400,000 people survive who would have otherwise died because of the work of the peace movement. And it's something that didn't make headlines. Nobody was paying attention, and it was a long, hard slog working on a very targeted campaign. And we didn't win. We never got that bill passed. We just made U.S. support of Saudi Arabia shaky enough that the Saudis decided it was time to push for a ceasefire. So I love that Yemen is the example you use. It's not something that a lot of people are paying attention to. But in reality, the U.S. has been part of a war that's killed a couple million people there.
Yeah. That's the statistics on how U.S. weapons are in almost every conflict. I forget the percentage, but it's quite high. Any conflict around the world, U.S. manufactured weapons are going there and fueling it. Yeah. And pointing it out, like Sudan wasn't on my radar, but I think you had pointed out that we are giving the weapons to is it Qatar, and then Qatar is then shipping
that might, I don't know how the flow happens.
Maybe it wasn't you, but
I
was like, I don't know more than them. I was like, oh, because you have to go around certain things. This is like Iran-Contra.
Right. You can't send weapons here, so you send them somewhere else. Great example of that is ISIS in Syria. We were officially sending billions of dollars a year in weapons and spending billions of dollars training moderate Sunni rebels in Syria, right? Yeah. And anybody who understood the Syrian conflict understood that it was a conflict between the Baathists, who were essentially secular corporatists, who used to be U.S. supported but ran afoul, Saddam being a Baathist as well, and the Wahhabi Sunni faction that wanted to establish religious caliphate, and that was aligned with the Saudis, and that includes the Islamic State, Al Qaeda, and we were supposedly funding these moderate rebels, but they never existed. There was never that faction, and all of the weapons we were sending there were winding up in the hands of ISIS and Al Qaeda, al-Nusra, the folks there who were essentially the only people actually fighting Assad and the Baathists.
Yeah.
And we supported their side, and Russia supported the Baathists, and we pretended to have a good working relationship with Russia, but anybody who follows what was going on there knows that that wasn't the case. But there was, when we talk about these things being kind of out in the open, it's like we weren't saying we were funding and arming al-Nusra, Al-Qaeda, ISIS.
Right.
We said we were funding people who didn't exist. We're funding these moderate Syrian rebels, but you could see where the weapons were going. I mean, you could, the folks with the Humvees and M16s were ISIS. They were al-Nusra. So it doesn't take it doesn't take a lot of investigative journalism to realize that we were willfully providing weapons to them, and that's part of the reality of who we are. We don't care who we're working with as long as our weapons companies are making money and it's destabilizing our adversaries.
That point there, Tom Cotton just said something remarkable. It's sloppy. It's something I think you described that
Wouldn't
our
expect anything Tom Cotton said not to be sloppy. But.
Well, it's sloppy, revealing, because these people, they could hold up, like they talk about Likud's party is sloppy. Like they have a geopolitical strategy that's roughly the same as it always was, but the politicians, based on who elects them, it's sloppy, just like today's politics is sloppy, just like you go back, the conversations. And where is my... Oh, I don't have it. But he said, I'll have to come back to it another time.
No, I want to hear it.
Tom Cotton. Yeah, he just said this because it was Tulsi Gabbard's confirmation hearing.
Yeah.
And he said, in a fallen world, we have to make our friends where we find them. No questions. Stable democracies make the most stable friends. But what matters is, in the end, is less whether a country is democratic or non-democratic, and more whether the country is pro-American or anti-American. Mm-hmm. And so they'll broker a deal, our State Department, I don't know how to expand on that, they'll broker a deal with anybody who will further our interests. In the Middle East, it's destabilizing the Arab nations. It is and we'll broker a deal with anybody. We'll sell weapons to any terrorist group. With the same terrorist groups, we will be friends in one country and enemies in another.
Absolutely,
Right? We are helping Al Qaeda against the Houthis, right, in Yemen, and there may be talks of a ground offensive, but we're going to make sure that those guys have the weapons they need
to fight the Houthis.
To fight the Houthis. But we were also, Lloyd Austin, when he was CENTCOM commander, was also friends with. He actually had a problem with this because they were our allies against, they were fighting Al Qaeda in Yemen. And then afterwards we turn around, we change the policy, changes so fast. Russia, or the Soviet Union's our enemy, our friend. But Nazi Germany falls, they are now our enemy. Right? It just keeps it changes on a dime.
Shifts as it needs to
quickly. It's So we were talking about Yemen, and I have a couple of things here. And so we go in, we have these wars where we talk about we care about the people in these countries, we're doing it for them. But what do we actually do for them after the war is over? What do we actually do for them while the war was happening? Except massive casualties, right? Totally destroying their way of life. I don't know what Iraq...
roads, water, electricity.
Iraq was already in what was called the Stone Age after the first Gulf War. And we invaded them again in 2003.
The sanctions were absolutely crippling. They had no economy. The unemployment was staggering. There was hunger. And we went ahead and invaded and then didn't rebuild. Left them in tatters a second time. When I've worked with folks who, Iraqis who have come to the U.S. to work on peace, one of the things that they very quickly taught me is that Iraqis don't talk about a first Iraq war and a second Iraq war. To them, it never ended. Like, there was bombing in the early 90s, and then there were sanctions that were absolutely crippling. And sanctions are an act of war. That's, you know,
Yes.
you're targeting the poorest and most vulnerable. You're targeting medical infrastructure and food infrastructure. Sanctions like the ones that were imposed on Iraq are a form of war. And just because there weren't bombs falling for a decade doesn't mean that the war ever ended for Iraqis. It just had different phases. There was bombing, there was starvation sanctions, and then there was a ground invasion.
Right. Because it's that Madeleine Albright quote, 96, 60 Minutes, where she says it was worth the price of upwards of 500,000 children have died from basic things.
Yeah.
Of just having clean drinking water, because they can't get spare parts for all their water purification plants. Or, and that thing where, well, we take losses on both sides. People would say, well, we lost people in Iraq. We don't have to apologize. But Vietnam, Jimmy Carter, 77. He was asked if he felt any moral obligation to help rebuild the country. This is Vietnam. We were there for over a decade.
Yeah.
And his reply, well, the destruction was mutual. You know, we went to Vietnam without any desire to capture territory and impose American will on other people. We went there to defend the freedom of the South Vietnamese. And I don't feel we ought to apologize or castigate ourselves or to assume the status of culpability. You're familiar with the figures, but maybe our viewers don't. 1.5 to 3.8 million Vietnamese were killed. 600,000 to 800,000 Cambodians were killed. Massive carpet bombing campaign. That's where the genocide. This is when they escalated the war. This is Henry Kissinger's legacy. Over 1 million Laotians killed. In comparison, 58,000 U.S. soldiers killed. Right. They were sent there for what? And we did what? And it was considered mutual destruction. But we didn't suffer anything here at home. We brought home wounded soldiers in caskets and whatnot. For what? And this is some this is, who is this?
And Iraq is the same thing. I mean, we back in 2016 neighborhood, before Trump took office the first time, most of northern Iraq was controlled by ISIS. You know, essentially the puppet government we had set up had been toppled, and they're back on their feet now. But you know, Iraq's road has been terribly bumpy since we went in. I don't think, you know, even when we were there, Iraqis would talk to us and say, like, I hated Saddam. He was horrible. He was not a good leader. But this is worse. You know, having U.S. vehicles pushing our cars off the road, shutting down our way of life, controlling us. This is worse. And I used to get that from pretty much any Iraqi who could speak enough English to communicate it. Like, what are you still doing here?
How many had run-ins with contractors who don't work under DoD policy?
Sure, yeah.
Blackwater, remember that one thing where...
Well, and it's... I'm always shocked that people don't seem to learn the lesson about what war does to people. You know, and we saw it with Abu Ghraib, and we see it, you know, with the shock and outrage when Israelis abuse Palestinians. When you take a person's brain, there's a really complicated process that goes into teaching someone to kill and dehumanizing. And when you do that, you have to traumatize the person, and then you throw them into a combat situation. Usually, you were talking young men, 18 to 24 years old, who are you know, abused and abused mentally by the military to train their brain to kill, and then sent into combat situations. And we're shocked when they torture and they do things that we consider morally abhorrent. But we've broken people. You know, like, this is. You know, they talk about it as, you know, like the breaking down and building back up of people, but there's the psychological conditioning that is training a brain to kill. You can you know, there's some great work by Lieutenant Colonel, his name's escaping me right now, but he designed the basic training program at Fort Benning that I went through for infantry school, and it's it stems from S.L.A. Marshall during the Civil War, during World War II, who discovered that less than 25% of soldiers were actually shooting to kill. That some of them were shooting rounds into the ground, that some of them weren't firing, but that less than 25% were actually able to look at another human being and kill them. And so they basically set about the science of what makes a person able to kill. They also looked at Civil War battlefield stratigraphy, and they'd find that more than half of muskets recovered from the Civil War would have multiple rounds in the barrel. They were loading, lifting, and then not firing over and over again. A regiment that could put 1,000 holes a minute in a piece of paper the size of an opposing army was dropping 2 to 3 people a minute. There are 2 stripes of rounds on any Civil War battlefield. One is below where one army was standing, and one is above where the army was standing. So those who were firing were primarily raising their rifle and either intentionally firing low or intentionally firing high to not kill, which is why these battles would go on for hours. Almost all vertebrates have that inner resistance to killing. There are a few exceptions, but piranhas will slap tails to fight. Two bucks fighting in the woods will lock antlers and push rather than goring each other and killing each other. You can put a wild, hungry wolf in a room with a poodle, and it will recognize that this is the same species as me, and it won't kill and eat it. And there are a few species where warfare still happens. Rats are a notable exception, but almost all vertebrates are resistant to killing their own species. And so you have to put the brain in a situation that feels like combat. So you do sleep deprivation and food deprivation and constant trauma, and the screaming drill sergeant it's for a purpose. It's to get your outer brain to calm down, your adrenaline to flow, and your inner brain to kind of take over. And then they put you on a firing line, and they put up a pop-up target that is the shape of a human being, and they do it with your brain in a state where you can't really tell that that's not a person, and then you shoot it down. And once you hit the required number, you pass the course, and you pass a phase of basic training. You get a pizza party or a full night's sleep in a shower or some kind of reward, and the cycle starts over. And they do that over and over again until your brain is at a state where killing is second nature. And there's no fixing that. Once they've done it to you, you're forever a killer. They've forever stripped your humanity of that inner resistance to killing another human. But they've stripped you of more than that, and I think that's what we see in these war atrocities. And I'm never surprised by things like Abu Ghraib. I'm never surprised when soldiers are abusing the people they're at war with, because dehumanization and breaking down your humanity is part of becoming a soldier. It's part of getting ready to go do that terrible job.
There's I think the term contact time. I remember, was it Saddam's invasion of Kuwait the first time, where he sent in his royal guard, I believe, and it was limited contact time because he didn't want any atrocities to happen, because without that increasing contact time and less disciplined soldiers, you're going to have things where men are doing things to women or the civilian population in general.
Right.
It's going to happen regardless. There's no better people. Right. It's a tendency.
Yeah. You put people in that situation under those kind of restraints, and you lose your humanity so fast. It's so easy to do.
You can listen to the depositions of the My Lai massacre, the soldiers that were part of that, and it's disturbing because everybody has a capacity for this. Yeah. The Nuremberg trials, what they would talk about.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so we're talking about war. Well, why do these wars keep popping up? So we go to training to learn to dehumanize, but then you learn about the population to be dehumanized. They're less than. So now all of Russian soldiers who are being killed in Ukraine are celebrated, right? Killed. They shouldn't have come over there. It's such a shame, but we're gonna.
Yeah, they're the bad guys.
They're the bad guys. Yeah. Where you have escalations, or I don't know where we're at with Iran. I don't know where we're at with China in the potential future, but that propaganda is there. It comes along, so we are prepped and ready to go to serve and
That's right.
be okay with the massive slaughter, be okay with the collateral damage that will inevitably come, because as I keep hearing, World War II strategic bombing was a joke. It was an inside joke. There was no strategic bombing. There never, and all these strikes on the Houthis that in the signal chat, they're slaughtering civilians. And now the sloppiness, there's no pretense like it's just killing and their lives are worthless. It's not the news.
Yeah, this is one of the sad realities of, and again, I've kind of stepped back from movement in a number of ways in the last year or two. But one of the realities of Trump is that his policies aren't, some of his policies are different. A domestic, foreign policy, they're not hugely different from the Democratic Party. It's just that he's not afraid to say it in public. Right. We go back to Barack Obama, who's seen kind of as a saint on the left at this point, right?
Like, he was so respectable. He dressed it in human language or humanitarian language.
Yeah, but President Obama was the first American president to openly and without ever apologizing, intentionally kill an American child overseas. Abdul Rahman al-Awlaki, the son of Anwar al-Awlaki, was hit with a targeted strike. He was mourning his father, who was an Al-Qaeda member, who wrote and recruited for Al-Qaeda. First they killed Anwar, and then they hit the house where people were mourning him. And one of the people there was his 16-year-old son, who had flown over from Denver, where he was born and raised. He's an American teenager whose father had been killed, who went to do the ceremonial family mourning, and they blew up the whole family. His little sister Nora stayed in Denver. She was only 3 at the time. In his first weekend as president in January of 2017, President Trump sent Navy SEALs in, and they shot her through the throat. She was 6 then, but she was 2 or 3 when her brother was hit with a missile. So the targeting of American children. For me, that was a it's not like American children should be viewed as any more or less than Yemeni children, and we've killed thousands of Yemeni children and Palestinian children, Pakistani children, Syrian children. But it was a moment where it's like, okay, if the U.S. president has one job, it's to protect American kids, right? Like, if there's one thing you should do, it's that. And it's just that Trump talks about it. He puts it right out in the open where we can see it. He brags about his brutality. I was starting to say that the people who believe that Muslim children, Chinese children, Iranian children are real human beings who should be protected and cared for, we're as anathema to the Democrats as we are to Republicans. The parties don't appreciate that viewpoint, that those are human beings who should be protected and that we shouldn't be killing them. There are lots of good jobs created in New Hampshire by militarism, and that needs to be held in place by a media that's willing to continue to try to scare us and convince us that we have enemies around every corner. And it takes politicians who are willing to continue to vote for it to bring home those good jobs, keeping Americans safe. And it takes a monetary system that depends on those Pentagon contracts and the revolving door of the Pentagon to the lobbyists, and the reality that Pentagon contractors are major funders in all of our elections, at least at the federal level.
I have 2 stats for that. Sorry, do you want to go?
No, that's. I mean, my point is just that we're kind of a death cult. Our country it's kind of a death cult. We are. Willing to murder and commit mass murder to, and we have been for a very long time. And the difference between Trump and, to some extent, even Bush and Romney and the Republicans that we were used to until Trump came on the scene, and you could lump the Democrats in with them, is just that Trump is open about it. He just tells us the truth about who we are and what we believe. Others couch it in really flowery, gentle language. But we haven't really at our core changed. Trump's kind of who this country is, and who we've been for a really long time.
On that point, the humanitarian, with the genocide in Gaza, many people, high-ranking people in the State Department, have resigned from their positions. I forget her name. She just put out an article in the Quincy Institute.
Yeah.
But the reports came out that the humanitarian aid wasn't flowing into Gaza. This was 2024. Blinken had lied before Congress. These people have resigned because he lied, and Congress was fine with it because it gave them the green light to send the weapons.
That's right.
And there's a WikiLeaks cable that was to Rex Tillerson, Trump's first term. I forget the sociopath who had sent this to him. It said, humanitarian aims or intentions, or it's good. Let's say the U.S. has your back and will overlook your humanitarian atrocities if you're our ally and get things done. And it's since 9/11, most of the terrorism supported or somehow tied to Saudi Arabia, but that's the one country who escapes all this because we have
great relations.
It's about
they sell us their oil on our terms.
It's geopolitical, and humanitarian is a veneer that's useful sometimes, but so it's useful in Ukraine, and it is not when it comes to Israel, when it comes to our Middle East policy.
That's right.
The Pentagon consumes more than half of the federal discretionary budget. And that means it's like I get to hear military Keynesianism. Right. This is public spending. So all the Republicans, smaller government. No, this is a jobs program. A lucrative, wasteful jobs program that could have been spent on infrastructure here, but we are sending it in munitions overseas while things erode here.
That's right. Our bridges are falling down. Our rail is nearing a century old at this point. We have neglected infrastructure and development domestically in order to have a Keynesian project that is bipartisan and supported by and that everyone's able to engage in at the federal level. The first person who used the term military Keynesianism with me was my mentor Arnie Alpert, and it's really stuck with me as an accurate representation of how our federal government operates.
Even during austerity, Reagan years, it was military, anything for the military, not the military, arms manufacturing. Contracts. And now that she's not running for re-election, I'll just tell a little story about Anne McLean Custer, who, when she first ran for Congress, filled out a questionnaire for New Hampshire Peace Action. And in it, she said she would support 25% cuts to the Pentagon budget, which at that point, the 25% number had been a long-term campaign that a bunch of organizations were on board with, trying to get a 25% cut in the Pentagon budget after the war in Iraq had kind of ramped down. And she said, absolutely, I support that. Her first speech when she got to Congress was about the 10% sequestration cuts, and it was about the loss of good jobs at BAE in Merrimack. That's what she talked about the first time she was there, opposing a 10% cut when she'd said she was going to support 25. So the indoctrination is so quick when you get to Capitol Hill, and you've got to get on board with what the main parties want done. And it's damn sad, is what it is, because we could be such a force for good, but it's not politically expedient. It's not economically expedient. It would require work. It would require retraining people in their jobs. It would require repurposing things, and it's more convenient to maintain military control of the world rather than try to seek coexistence and cooperation. And they have to, because they're constantly looking for new markets. They are constantly looking to privatize. Ukraine right now, this was known before when Zelensky said he was open for business back in 22. Bring in American businesses. We're going to privatize Ukrainian assets. We're going to take these because that's a lucrative new market. So not only is it public funding that gets these weapons to Ukraine, but it's public funding that goes into the rebuilding of Ukraine. And then these people make out, and it's hard to find out a complex network of people who are making out large in these top corporations. And they never care. These representatives never care about the illegality because they're never held responsible.
Yeah. And I think we can't ignore the reality that it's not just the CEO of Raytheon making $26 million. It's also the budget oversight director at Raytheon who's making 120 and supporting a family of 6.
Yeah.
There are families whose dignity depends on Pentagon dollars, and for whom the idea of a transition away from a military Keynesian economy is very threatening. And I don't think that we can just push through that and ignore it. We need to be aware of the reality that we are talking about a transition that will be uncomfortable for a lot of folks, and that we also are working against a population that is. I mean, when you look at how Nazi Germany propagandized the Germans, they ain't got nothing on our media and our government and the way we are propagandized, the way we are taught through school and through our media that we are threatened by all these countries. And it's important, China is the next largest military spender on earth after the US. And they're, at this point, about a third of our military budget. That's not enough to attack us, right? I weigh 280 pounds. You would not see a 90-pound person decide to pick a fight with me, because that wouldn't make a lot of sense. And that's, it's the same kind of thing where we have such a massive and a network of allies that's also pretty significant. Nobody wants a war with the U.S. Nobody's ready to attack us.
No.
We are not at risk, but we consent to not developing our infrastructure, to letting our roads rot, to letting our bridges rot, to letting our rail system rot, to not having health care, having people go bankrupt because of health care, in order to maintain an economy that makes weapons and kills people. When you build a bomb and you blow up a bridge, you've just destroyed someone else's economy. But when you build a bridge in your own country, instead of building a bomb, you then have the trade that goes across that bridge. So the loss in development to us and to the rest of the world by continuing down this road is something that humanity just can't afford. And so I think we've got to transition away from it. But it's a long road, and the forces we're up against really don't want to change.
And we don't feel it. We don't feel like when we're at war, it's like, oh, it's happening, it's over there. We don't feel we haven't been bombed.
Right.
We haven't had the wartime, maybe the shortages in the 70s, gas lines, right? But
Prices,
we haven't.
Price fluctuations.
And what it takes for all this to happen, on that road trip, I read some things off from that book. They thought they were free. For all that was required, this is citizenry. For all that was required of most of them, that they did nothing. They weren't compelled to do anything wrong. The German community, the rest of the 70 million Germans, apart from the million or so who operated the whole machinery of Nazism, had nothing to do except not to interfere. Absolutely nothing was expected of them to go on as they had, paying their taxes, reading their local paper, and listening to the radio. The most powerful and most dangerous people in all the world are the unattached, the self-reliant, and the essentially solitary. No one had time to think about fundamentals. There were too many things happening. Meetings, rallies, works, reports, and other demands of the community. To be detached, to go to war, but it would, like, you could work for the rail here during World War II, and it was great. Jobs, everybody's employed, money, war's over there. But the same rail worker, say in Germany, who might be getting carpet bombed, has to flee, or the food shortages, this is really desperate times. We're being constantly bombed. We support our country, but is this sure? You had limited information, but it's not brought home here, and that's something kinetic that's happening now that you feel them. Maybe this war isn't such a good thing, but we don't feel the effects.
I do think that's why there's a larger portion of veterans and military families engaged in the peace movement. There are two roads you can take once you've experienced that kind of trauma, and one is to really kind of double down and root yourself in this ideology that this is for democracy and freedom and everything that is right and true and just, and the other is to accept that you've done something irredeemably awful by being part of mass state-sponsored murder. And that truth is one that drives a lot of veterans and military families. Understanding what we're doing and coming to grips with it drives a lot of veterans and military families into the peace movement. And I think that's why there are so many people like us who've seen parts of the machine operating, who come forward and work for peace.
Yeah, you come forward. That's why I think Air Force is pretty small sample size from all the branches, because we're, what do you say? You're away. You're not in
there's some distance.
The combat.
Yeah,
like
usually.
I remember that World War II. Typically, right? Drone warfare is changing things.
Yeah.
World War II. I remember the studies. One study particularly, for any soldier who was in combat for more than 60 days, came home. Only 2% of that population was okay with it.
Yeah.
That we would call them sociopaths today.
Yeah.
But the rest 98%, they were disturbed by what would be PTSD, like this was traumatic, shooting at people, being shelled, whatever it was.
Yeah.
Only 2% of the population's okay with it.
Right.
And that should be concerning of constant combat.
Right. No, I mean, you can break a brain and you can make it okay with that. You can make it like killing. But you've destroyed the humanity of that person. You've taken something that can't be given back. And there's never, there are these quotes from war makers along the way. And I someone said you could no more. I don't remember if it was Churchill or somebody unsavory said you can no more win a war than you can win an earthquake. And that's the truth of it. It is mass murder. There's no other way to talk about it, and it's always wrong. There's always another way, and humanity's got to find that other way. This is not a sustainable way to exist on this planet.
And today, we lack the empathy, or let's say the American government lacks the empathy to see the humanity of the Palestinians who don't have a chance in this. As a genocide is going on in Gaza, what was given political cover called a war, and we send weapons over. It's mostly children. Yeah,
and it's still referred to as the Israel and Hamas war, as if Hamas had an army, as if Hamas had tanks and guns and was able to do more than throw stones. Essentially, we're not talking about a military that can actually go to war against Israel. We're talking about a primarily civilian population with a few insurgents mixed in. We're able to just say they're not human. Palestinians are not human and Israelis are, and so they get to wipe out the non-humans. And that it's. I wish everybody could see what the children they consider them. The bad guys, be they Russian children or Palestinian children or Iraqi children or Iranian children or Yemeni children, see what they look like when they're playing, see what they look like when they're hungry, understand that they're just as human and just as real as ours. Because I think that if people could just take that to heart, that they would not be all right with war as business as usual. That wouldn't be okay with them.
Yeah. We have another minute or so here. Is there anything you'd like to share?
No, just thank you, Jesse. I really appreciate that you've started doing this show and that you invited me on.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed.